Hello everyone, welcome back to the show. My name's Dan, this is Exploder. I'm here with another episode just for you. Aren't you special? After taking a little time off with our live episode, and then I did the episode on action figures, I'm back with another episode. And in this episode, I want to talk about something that's really prevalent in the world of professional wrestling. I want to talk about so-called dirt sheets. Now, to understand how dirt sheets work, you have to understand the climate of professional wrestling. Professional wrestling used to be a very closed-off sport. That's how we always knew it, and that's all it always was. It was kayfabe. It was if you weren't in it, you didn't understand it, and so on and so forth. Basically, anything that was known about wrestling was something you saw in the ring. If it happened behind the scenes, you didn't know anything about it, and that's the way they liked it. Now, the rise of wrestling magazines over the years were all in kayfabe. If you ever read an aftermag, as they call them, the PWIs and others that even preceded it, they were all in kayfabe. So if there was an angle going on between Bruno Sammartino and Larry Zbyszko, they were going to tell you what the angle was, maybe in their own way, and they'd have these little fake interviews or what have you, but they were still keeping kayfabe. It would be a while before this idea of behind the scenes even came prevalent. Even the idea that the gimmick was a gimmick, that there was a real story behind the scenes, and that's where the shoot ideas came from. But the idea of people talking about stuff behind the scenes wasn't that prevalent. And then you saw in the 80s and especially in the 90s, there was the prevalence of hotlines. Hotlines were always talking about if you were in WWF hotline or a WCW hotline or even the Hulk Hogan hotline, brother. By the way, I covered this in episode 19, Call the Hotline. Great title there. Check that out when I talk in depth about the nature of hotlines. But hotlines were they were keeping kayfabe. And Mean Gene Okerlund, who was a great guy, loved Mean Gene, but quite frankly, he would make some stuff up or they would do something that would advance a storyline, which is completely in their purview. But the hotlines were gimmicks. The only ones that really didn't. During the 90s, you saw the prevalence of these hotlines coming from independent sources, guys like Wade Keller, Brian Alvarez, and even ECW's hotline to a point. They would do some gimmick, but it was a lot of like rumors and innuendo, and I think I have to pay a nickel to Bruce Pritchard now. I'm pretty sure because I use the term rumor and innuendo. Anyway. But yeah, you would have this stuff where all these smaller guys would get a hotline or something you would call in and they would tell you the rumors and things like that. And they were very prevalent in the 90s. So that was something where, again, they weren't talking about what the latest Hogan storyline was. They were talking about the stuff behind the scenes. And maybe it helped craft some of the perceptions of guys like Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage and Shawn Michaels and so on and so forth. Maybe true, maybe not. But it is that perception that was maybe crafted by these hotlines. And then there's radio shows. Believe me, I'm going to get to the topic on hand, but I have to explain the backstory here. Then there are radio shows. Guys like Mike Tenay got started doing radio. Mike Tenay had a radio show back in the day, and that sort of parlayed into his announcing jobs for When Worlds Collide, the original pay-per-view in the early 90s, and then eventually getting a job for WCW. He had a radio show. Mark Madden, who I could not stand as an announcer, and one day I want to do a episode on terrible announcers, and Mark Madden will be on that list, I guarantee it. But he got started in radio, and he actually, when WCW folded, he went back to radio and became more of a sports radio guy, but he had a radio show. And you had guys like Jim Ross, who, while working for WCW, also had a radio gig on the side because, again, Jim Ross's background is in radio. And at one point, which was really funny because Jim Ross talked about in the one episode where he's leaving WCW, he's basically on his way out. They're kind of demoting him and pushing him out the door, but he still has this deal and he works for WCW, but the radio deal is completely separate. So he's on syndicated radio under the employ of WCW, and he brings on Vince McMahon. So he brings on, not even the competitor, the dominator, the guy who ruled the industry at that time, especially because WCW was nowhere close to where they would be years later, but he brings on Vince McMahon to talk. I'm sure they were very happy about that. Vince Russo back in the day, long before he became the king of bros and pole matches, he had a radio show in the early 90s, and he criticized the early 90s product, which, to be fair to Vince Russo, God, that phrase does not feel right. To be fair to Vince Russo, he was right. The early 90s WF product from 1993 to really 1996 was awful. It just was. They were trying to recreate 80s WWF without Hogan. And on the other side, WCW was recreating the 80s WWF with Hogan and the Dungeon of Doom. Yeah, wrestling at the time was just awful. They had plumbers and race car drivers, garbage men, 12 doinks, so on and so forth. And that was just what was on Monday Night Raw. every week. So no. So what does it have to do with anything? What does it have to do? Well, as all of this stuff's happening, there's also this rise of newsletters. Now, these are the newsletters that are called affectionately, or not so much, really not really affectionately, but the dirt sheets. Newsletters have been around since at least the mid-'80s. And of course, you can't talk about a newsletter without talking about the Wrestling Observer. The Wrestling Observer was started by Dave Meltzer, which he began publishing in 1982. The first newsletter, which was a physical copy that he would mail out to people, used to be between 16 and 24 pages long. I don't know what was going on in 1982 that would require 16 to 24 pages of typed news. This is before Hulkamania, so this is AWA still around. WCW is still Jim Crockett Promotions, which I'm sure there was a lot of stuff going on there. The WWF existed, but again, this was before Hulk Hogan, so they were still, Bob Backlund was probably, at this time, I think Bob Backlund was champion, and I'm sure that was a whole half a page on his exciting matches. Please don't hurt me, Mr. Backlund. Point is, but yeah, 16 to 24 pages of a typed newsletter that he would mail out. He was at one point, Meltzer was talking about getting out of it. He decided to come back, and in 1987, which is a great time to do it, he decided to do it full time. He went to a smaller 8-page format, which is way more manageable and way better on, I would imagine, your fingers. I'd imagine typing 16 to 24 pages on a regular basis is, every 2 to 3 weeks even. That's just asking for carpal tunnel syndrome. We don't want that. Now, Meltzer, while criticized by some people, and I'm going to get to the criticisms, some people say that he's just another dirt sheet guy. Honestly, he took more of a journalistic approach to it. And while some people in the business absolutely hate him, and like I've explained, I'll get into the criticism and the issues, others liked him. Bill Watts liked him. Terry Funk even is a fan of the Wrestling Observer newsletter. And I've been very honest about this. Terry Funk is my favorite wrestler of all time. So to me, if Terry Funk likes it, I can criticize Meltzer on certain things. I can criticize a lot of the guys I'm going to mention. But the idea of a dirt sheet, the idea of a newsletter that talks about the goings on of wrestling behind the scenes, if Terry Funk is for it, it's hard to argue against it. Because Terry Funk, although you wouldn't think of it to look at him, and you wouldn't think of it as his pedigree, he's always been a little ahead of the game. He's also been a very smart person as a booker in Japan and even in America. He was the guy on the edge of things, and he saw where things were going, and he's very good at that. So if he's a fan of these Observer, of these type of newsletters, then I think you're onto something. And I would tend to be on the side of a guy like Terry Funk as opposed to a lot of other people in the industry. And like I said, Meltzer had acceptance from guys like Bill Watts and even Houston promoter Paul Bosch, who taught him about the inner workings of the professional wrestling business. So there is this divide over people that just think it's complete garbage, and then there are people that actually accept it as some form of journalism. Now, again, I'm talking about the criticisms here. I will talk about the criticism. How much of journalism it is, I mean, we'll get into. But Dave Meltzer is the idea of the 5-star match that you hear. This did not start with him. Jim Cornette revealed that started with someone who was doing something similar years before, the star rating system, but really the one who made it famous was Dave Meltzer. And good or bad, when you think of a 5-star match, you're thinking of it because it's in the way that Dave Meltzer and his associates rank things. So that's sort of that part of the culture that comes in, and it comes from a specific source. Then there's the Figure 4 Weekly by Brian Alvarez from Bothell, Washington. If you've ever heard him on his podcast, you've ever heard him on the radio, you've ever heard anything about the guy. I mean, I listen to his stuff on YouTube all the time. Brian Alvarez, sometimes indie wrestler. He's got a martial arts background, gymnastics background, and he started Figure 4 Weekly, which was, again, a newsletter. They became Figure 4 Online, and then in June 12, 2008, Wrestling Observer, their website, which was started later, merged with Figure 4 Weekly, and they became a single website, and they took the style of Figure 4 Weekly, which was better, and then after years of being a newsletter, the Wrestling Observer was a newsletter that went for over 25 years. That was, for most of those 25 years, just a print newsletter that was mailed out. It became online, an online subscription service. So you can go through and you pay a certain amount a month and you get an online newsletter, which is a lot easier and a lot less costly, and it gives you the same amount of information. Other people include the Pro Wrestling Torch, started by Wade Keller, which was started in 1987 when he was still in high school of all things. Again, a newsletter he mailed out from Minnesota. They launched a website in 99, and they did a combination of recaps, analysis, interviews with wrestling personalities. They would do interviews, and, of course, as you tend to do, there'd be rumors, behind the scenes talk, and so on and so forth. There was Lariat Weekly, Pro Wrestling Insider. The point is, there's a lot, okay? Like I said with the hotlines, at some point everyone had a hotline. I'm sure at some point everyone and their mother got the idea to start a newsletter. The difference between starting one and keeping one is longevity, is structure, and is what kind of information you're actually putting out. If you're putting out straight hot garbage on a weekly basis, you're going to have subscribers for a couple of weeks, a couple months maybe, but you're going to fizzle out. The people I've mentioned, the Wade Kellers, there's even Bruce Mitchell. I'm not fully up on Bruce Mitchell, but it's a name I hear a lot. You hear these names, the Bruce Mitchells of the world, the Wade Kellers, Brian Alvarez, Dave Meltzer. These are the guys that keep going and are constantly working because their stuff works. Now, as I've said, I was going to get to, here we are, we've arrived. We're talking about the criticism of newsletters. Eric Bischoff has taken umbrage in a lot of cases where he's talking about the newsletters, because Conrad Thompson on their podcast 83 Weeks, which I listen to, I will fully admit that. I like what I do, but you got to admit when you're fans of other people. I'm a fan of the Conrad Thompson podcast. I've heard a little bit of the Arn Anderson podcast. I love the Eric Bischoff 83 Weeks. I love the Bruce Pritchard, something to wrestle with. I like those shows. And Bruce Pritchard says that thing, like I said earlier, the rumor and innuendo, and sort of takes offense. But Eric Bischoff seems almost contrite and angry when he talks about a guy like Dave Meltzer. And I think I kind of get it, but then I kind of don't. See, the thing about Dave Meltzer is Dave Meltzer's reporting things where he has sources. And the biggest thing that Eric Bischoff says is, well, he wasn't in the room. He doesn't know this. He doesn't know that. And that's true. That's understandable. But what he fails to understand is, when you try to take something as a journalist, and again, you can argue how much of a journalist and how much of just a rumor monger someone can be, and there are some people on both extremes, and we all know that. But when you say something like, oh, well, this guy doesn't know, he wasn't there, well, yeah, I don't think Dave Meltzer is backstage at every WWE show. I don't think he was in the booking meetings at WCW. I don't think he was getting a bounce check from Paul Heyman in ECW, although that'd be funny. But at the same time, he had sources. He's a journalist, so at the end of the day, you're going to have sources. You're going to have people you're going to build relationships. As a journalist, you have to. You're getting sources. You're not there. Every person who reports on politics is not always in the White House, but they have people that are, and they talk to people, and words get around, and sometimes it's rumor, sometimes it's fact, and so on and so forth. That's what journalism is. So in that regard, Meltzer is a journalist. He has sources. Now, whenever you have a source, you have to understand, and I think he does, if they're giving you some information, there's a reason for it. A source a guy working for WWE right now doesn't just throw something at Dave Meltzer because it's fun to do. Because in the right situation, if you're low enough on the card and they realize you're leaking scripts or you're saying certain things you shouldn't be saying, you can get fired. So it's not something that you're just going to say because it's fun. And that was the thing. Eric Bischoff talks about how he was sure in WCW's time that the person talking to Dave Meltzer, he was almost 100% sure, was Terry Taylor. And Terry Taylor was in a position where he was pretty well protected as far as his job, as it seemed, because he worked there forever, and he worked for WWE, and he worked for TNA. But he's like, yeah, he was pretty sure. He was pretty sure the person talking to Dave Meltzer and giving away some of this information was Terry Taylor. And the fact that he worked for WWE and WCW and TNA, and he was pretty much everyone who's worked with him pretty much said the same thing. Yeah, he was giving information to Meltzer. Now, why is he giving this information? Well, giving that information, there's a reason for it. Again, it's not just for fun. So maybe Terry Taylor, and most likely, was giving information to him. He was giving it in a certain way or a certain shift or a certain, and like I said, any guys, any of the boys, you don't have to be a constant source, but if, a guy wants something to slip or some guy's contract's coming up and he sort of gives a nudge to Dave Meltzer would be a fool not to report it, but that guy knows what he's doing. A Raven, and I'm not saying he did, but if Raven's contract was coming up and he let some information slip, and you guys can use the newsletters to their advantage. They can put things out there that maybe management doesn't want to know, but they can use it under the journalistic integrity of, hey, I'll say this, and Dave Meltzer's not going to say who said it, but word gets out anyway. So that's very much like real journalism. Now, the umbrage that Eric Bischoff and to somewhat of a lesser extent Bruce Pritchard take is, well, these guys aren't here. They weren't there, so they're just making stuff up. And to be fair, some of the stuff is made up. The idea that so-and-so was going to get hired at a time where Eric Bischoff would later say, yeah, we weren't even talking to him. The idea that at one point, the fourth member of the NWO, according to rumors, was supposed to be Davey Boy Smith. He was going to leave the WWF, come to WCW, and he was going to be the fourth NWO guy. It was supposed to be the night that the Giant turned. Well, when you talk to Eric Bischoff in 2018, as it was, that's not true. It's just not true. They were never talking to him. It was an idea, maybe he came over, and then nothing happened, and then they didn't bring him in. So that's a rumor that was busted years later. But then there's also stuff that they're right about, or if there's something where they're right about 80% of the information, and they mess something up. There's a detail wrong, or a date, or a payday, or something like that, where they're not wrong, but they're right on the general story. Journalists do not get everything right 100% of the time. It's good if you do. It's great if you do. But the idea that any journalist in any walk of life is going to get every single detail right on every single story is just unrealistic. So I don't fault a guy like Dave Meltzer or a Brian Alvarez or a Wade Keller when they have, they do this newsletter and, 60% of it is right or 70% of it is right, but then there's a bunch of crap that's not true. They're going on their sources, they're going by what they hear, but they're right. They're not in the room. They're not there in the booking meeting, so sometimes they extrapolate a little bit. Maybe they go too far sometimes, but they extrapolate and they sort of create a narrative. Now, the narrative can be deceitful. The narrative, not on purpose, but it can be. Maybe sometimes, like I said, maybe there's a crafting of our view of Hulk Hogan because of this negative view of him that's crafted by these newsletters. Maybe it's because the belief exists already and the newsletters just go with it, or the newsletters craft it themselves, or maybe it's a combination of the two. Because you hear Eric Bischoff ever tell the story, he says it like, oh yeah, well, Hulk Hogan was this, that, and the other, and he makes it sound very positive. But if you read the newsletters, Hogan was not always seen in a good light. And really, they say there's three versions of the truth. There's your story, my story, and then what actually happened. To that effect. It's paraphrased, but you know what I'm saying. And that's what it is. Is Hulk Hogan a truly benevolent being? No, I don't think so. Probably not. I think his racist sex tape proved that. Is he a complete evil man stroking his Fu Manchu, trying to figure out who he's gonna bury tomorrow? No. It's somewhere in the middle. So the idea that he's really good or really bad, not so much. I'm sure there's a little bit of both. Maybe he did bury this guy or that guy, or use his sway to get what he wanted here and not there. But at the same time, I don't think he's completely evil. So sometimes it's a narrative, and sometimes it's close to the truth, but not quite the truth, and then sometimes it's completely off. Now, when we're talking about the newsletters, why do the newsletters exist? Why do they exist at all? Why are they needed? Well, for two reasons. One, wrestling fans and even guys like Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan and Steve Austin and Vince McMahon himself will admit, wrestling fans are addicted to knowledge. I remember the first match I watched, I was 8 years old. It was WWF Superstars taping, and it was the Nasty Boys. So this was probably right before they went to WCW, if I remember correctly. And it was them, and it was Superstars tape. So it was them and some jobbers, I don't know, probably Sonny Dodgers, making his check and ham and eggs and whatever. But I saw it, but for years I just watched it and it was cool. But when I got about 11 or 12 was really when I wanted to learn more. I wanted to learn behind the scenes. I wanted to learn what was going on. I wanted to learn why this was this and that. And as you get older, if you're really a fan, you get into that. You want to know more. And it's not that you don't enjoy the in-ring product. It's not that you don't enjoy seeing Steve Austin beat the crap out of Vince McMahon on a weekly basis. It's not that you don't enjoy watching the NWO. And the reality is, when you see something on TV, you like that occasionally when you see something you don't think is supposed to happen. That you might be looking a little behind the curtain. When the NWO attacked Rey Mysterio and Marcus Bagwell and Arn Anderson, all those backstage, you just saw them and they have a bat and they lawn dart Rey Mysterio. There was a part of that where you thought, well, okay, that other stuff on TV I get, but that wasn't supposed to happen. That was different. That was real. So you like being fooled. But at the same time, you also like to know behind the scenes. You like to hear the rumors about, well, who might join the NWO, who might join the corporation, who might jump from WCW to WWF, and why is it Jeff Jarrett a couple times? The rumors. And you like that kind of stuff. And the thing is, the wrestling business was started, and I've covered this in other episodes, it started as a work. The idea of a work started because it was in the carnival. They were starting from day one to fool you, to entertain you, but to fool you on what was actually happening. Professional wrestling that's what kayfabe is. You were keeping it in-house and you were trying to fool the audience into coming to the shows to see these blood feuds between guys who, quite frankly, 99% of the time actually got along and were just doing business together. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the thing. But the difference is professional wrestling is such a special and unique situation. It's that they are there to fool you, to get you in the door, to get you interested in the next match, in the next feud, in the next pay-per-view, in the next. They want to fool you. The problem is there's no divide between what they want you to hear and what you want to hear. You want to know what's behind the scenes, and the reality is, in their mindset, to keep you to a certain point, they don't want you to know that. They want to work you. So for the longest time, the idea, if there was a WWF magazine, a WCW magazine, if you wanted the real information what was going on behind the scenes of what was coming up, you didn't read the WWF magazine. You didn't read the WCW magazine because they were working you. They were giving the information that they wanted you to hear. If they wanted you to think that Steve Austin might join the corporation, they were going to write an article that said Steve Austin might join the corporation. Now, it's probably not true. There's no reason to believe it would be true, and reality was they had no plans to do it. But if they wanted you to have that doubt, they would write a completely fake article to get you there. And that's fine. But if you're trying to find information behind the scenes, if you're trying not to be kayfabe, don't look at WCW, don't look at the WWF, don't look at them to give that to you, because they're going to feed you the narrative. The narrative is the product, and they want you to like the product. They're doing their job. But the rise of newsletters, the guys who were behind the scenes, the guys who were rating matches, the guys who wanted to give you the rumors behind the scenes, whether they were 100% true or not, they were doing the best they could in most cases. They're giving it to you because you want that information, and they're not trying to work you. Now, this is where it differs from every other. Professional wrestling is that combination of entertainment and sport. But the difference between professional wrestling and every other sport and every other form of entertainment is every other form of entertainment has a real media. They have the show they're giving you, and then there's news behind the scenes, and they're both equally valid, and there's not contention. If someone's cast in the new Star Wars movie, you hear that. You hear so-and-so gets cast in the next Star Wars movie, and it's a separate piece of news that is given to you. The people that make Star Wars are not trying to convince you that Star Wars is real. And they're not going to say, oh, no, so-and-so wasn't cast as this character. This character is this person. No, they are two separate things. There's media. There is media in baseball. There are people that report on the games. You can watch the game, and then there's the person who gives you the stats. And the person who says, okay, well, so-and-so might be traded to the Reds next season. And so on and so forth. Now, it may not be 100% true, but they can talk about rumors, but it's not a contention. For the most part, the term dirt sheet, term dirt sheet to begin with is a pejorative. This is something meant to antagonize. This is something meant as an insult. This is dirt sheets. This is garbage. They're writing dirt. They're passing information. And sometimes, like I said, they're not right. Sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes a rumor is based in nothing. Sometimes, and yes, there are guys who go out there and just make things up. And I'm not going to deny that. It's not good, but it exists. But then again, we're also talking about an industry that gives you no reason to believe them. If you expect at any point the WWE to come out tomorrow and tell you the real rumors of what's going on behind the scenes and give you an accurate picture of things that maybe they don't want you to know, or so on and so forth, you think the WWF's going to come to you and say, hey, by the way, Sin Cara just asked for his release. Luke Harper asked for his release. This guy's not happy, that guy's not happy, these two people are sleeping together, so on and so forth. If you think the WWF is going to, the WB as it were, do you think the WB is going to come out tomorrow and tell you that? No, they're not. They're absolutely not, because that's not the information they want you to hear. And again, there's nothing wrong protecting their product. There's nothing wrong with giving you the narrative. But then again, it's also the thing where it would be like if Major League Baseball, going back to baseball, or the NBA, forget it. If the NBA tomorrow got mad at ESPN for reporting potential trades. That's what's going on here. The ESPN's over here as a separate news organization talking about things that are behind the scenes. Hey, here's the game. Here's how good a game this was. Here was the score. Here were the best players. And by the way, LeBron James might be switching teams again. This would be like the NBA getting mad at ESPN for reporting that, because it's not the story that the NBA once told. And in any other industry, that makes no sense. But in professional wrestling, that has been the long time contention. The guys who are in the industry, the guys who are in the office, and usually it's the office. I'm not saying some boys are, whatever. But, and I think the guys in the locker room, again, I'm not in a WWE locker room. I'm not in an AEW locker room right now. I'm not in any of those things. So I don't know. But to me, from what I've seen, it seems like the wrestlers are more accepting of it existing. And like I said, some guys use it for their own advantage, and some guys just like to read it because it's interesting, because at the end of the day, they're fans. They're fans who like to hear the goings on. It may not affect them directly, but hey, they like hearing about it. But to me, The Office, it always seems like The Office is a little more upset. Guys like Eric Bischoff, who hold a little bit of a grudge, and maybe they're a little upset because, well, we didn't lose this much. The figure they say was that WCW lost $90 million the year, the 1999 fiscal year. And Eric Bischoff goes, well, that's not true. They weren't in the meetings. They don't know. They don't know the accounting, so on and so forth. And then you ask Eric Bischoff, what did they lose? What did WCW lose that year? Well, he doesn't know. It wasn't 90. It wasn't 90 million. But what was it? He doesn't know. So he lives in that little ambiguity, but he has that thing where he goes, well, I was in the room. Okay. And that's something, that's something not everyone can say. Not everyone can say they were in a WCW booking meeting. Not everyone saying they were a WCW booker. Not everyone can say they wrote the finish to this match or that match. But the reality is, this kind of information, these newsletters, this kind of rumor is going to exist. The difference is whether you fight against it on a constant basis or you accept it as something that already exists and you just deal with it. That's the reality. I mean, the Wrestling Observer started in 1982, and it was started because the guy was a fan. Dave Meltzer was a fan, and he knew that other people wanted to hear what was going on, and he just gave them what they wanted. And yes, is he right 100% of the time? No, he's not. Of course he's not. But does he care enough about the sport to at least try and treat it like a journalistic endeavor? Yes. So is he going to be right 100% of the time? No. And I'm not saying this as a defense of Dave Meltzer. I know there are people that in groups I'm in on Facebook, and people I talk to personally, and people I get along with, don't like Dave Meltzer. And they've made their opinion known, and there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone can have their opinion on things. I've never required that everyone, that even people that listen to this show, you don't have to agree with me. You can go into this and think that Dave Meltzer is the biggest piece of garbage you ever heard in your life. And if that's the case, then you have not met a bunch of the people in the wrestling business, or even heard about them. I mean, New Jack stabbed a bunch of people. I don't think Dave Meltzer's ever stabbed anyone. God, I hope not. So he's at least behind New Jack. Can we agree on that? Anyway, you can not like Dave Meltzer, but you have to understand why he exists. You have to understand why a guy like Brian Alvarez exists. You got to understand why Wade Keller exists. You have to understand why the hotlines existed, independent magazines, why podcasts have come along. Podcasts like this is an opinion. What I'm sharing right now is my opinion. I am not in the WWE locker room, like I've said. I'm a fan sharing an opinion, and sometimes I'm going to react to a rumor. And that rumor may come from a good place, it may not. I hope it comes from a good place, and I try to use good sources. I mean, I don't have a source in the locker room, but second, third hand. Am I going to be right all the time? No. If I put something on Newsflash, or I put something on here where, oh, well, so-and-so's upset, maybe they'll end up in NWA or Ring of Honor or whatever. I don't know. It may not be true. But I'm basing it on what I think is true, and that's what I do. Is it true? I don't know. But I'm going to talk about it genuinely, and I'm going to give my opinion on something based on the information I'm given. Is it going to be perfect information? No. The idea of perfect information, even in the information era, even in the information age where you have any information you want at the click of a mouse, the idea that we're going to have perfect information, that we're just going to know everything, and we're going to have all the, oh yeah, I know everything going on in WWE right now because Dave Meltzer has sources, and those sources are always telling the truth without an agenda and everything. That's impossible. So if you're expecting that, we're never going to have news of any kind because there's no perfect information. The best you can do is hope they have a good source and hope that they have the ability to discern what's true and what's probably BS, and so on and so forth. That's what newsletters were, and that's what they continue to be. That's what podcasts are. That's what sharing your opinion is. I don't deal with a lot of rumor, honestly, and it's not that I have any moral objection to it. It's just because it would be reporting what Dave Meltzer said, or what Brian Alvarez said, or what Wade Keller said, and I think there's enough of that. Occasionally I might get into something, but I don't sit here and just run the rumor mill because it's redundant. Not that I have any problems with it, it's just redundant. So that's why I do these topics. I do topics I think that's a little different. I'm trying to do something a little different. I'm not just going to recap Raw, or SmackDown, or NXT, or AEW. I might do it again. Occasionally I might talk about something or a topic on hand, but I like the topics like this. That's my brand. That's what I do. But occasionally I might talk about a rumor, and again, I don't have perfect information, and if I'm proven wrong, hey, I'm proven wrong. And that's okay. But that's the nature of information. Wrestling fans love information, whether the industry likes it or not. And that's something I'm going to have to deal with. And in this age, it's just going to spread faster. And that's, again, something that deal with it. Either you're for him or against him. If you like Dave Meltzer or you don't, and there's no wrong answer, but it's just everyone has an opinion, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know it's been a while me talking about newsletters and things like that. It's a little long topic. It's a very specific topic. It's very inside baseball, as it were, and I feel like I've used that term more than a few times on this show, but I like to get in specifically on these things. I like to zero in a topic and talk about it at length. So for those of you that are wondering, this show is taped, except for the newsflash segment. If I have a newsflash segment, I'll be honest with you, it's a whole different thing. But these right here, these are one takes. I do a single take. I talk about what I want. I know the bullet points where I'm going, but I sort of talk the way I want to talk. And this is a one shot, and I'm glad you listen. I'm glad anyone who's up here who listens to this show. Podbean, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, wherever you're at. Facebook. I know a lot of people listen on Facebook. Wherever you're at, thank you for listening to the show. If you have a topic, you have an idea, message the page, put a comment below the video or the audio or whatever. Just comment. Twitter.com/ExploderPod. That's our Twitter. If you want to send a Twitter, Facebook. We have the Exploder Podcast on Facebook. Whatever you want to do. If you have any ideas or topics, or you think this, that, and the other, or you just want to tell me your opinion on Dave Meltzer, you do what you got to do, and I'll do what I got to do. But I invite conversation and all these things. So I just wanted to get that out, and I'm going to be doing some more topics. I'm probably going to take Christmas week off, to be honest with you. Really, I don't see anybody listening to a wrestling podcast during Christmas. I might do a little thing. I'm thinking about doing a little special thing about Christmas, but it won't be a full episode. It'll just be maybe a video or something Christmas related, but I'm probably not going to have a full episode that week. But I'm going to try and get another episode in before Christmas, and I don't know what it's going to be about, but I hope you enjoy it regardless. Until next time, my name's Dan. This is Exploder. Have a good one.
You are listening to a ZTO TV podcast. You can find all our shows on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcast entertainment simply by searching ZTO TV. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to rate and review because it really helps us out.